Hey everyone, ready for the weekend? I know I am, but looks like we might be in for a wild one here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, Mother Nature is sending us a little something special this time.
An atmospheric river, no less. That's what they're calling it.
And NBC Bay Area is already sounding the alarm bells with their latest article.
They're not pulling any punches with those warnings, so we're going to take a deep dive into that article today and see what we can learn.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Always good to be prepared.
Exactly. Plus, there's this whole king tides thing happening right as the storm hits.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That's definitely a combo that makes you go,
So we've got atmospheric rivers, king tides, and a whole bunch of weather warnings to unpack.
Should be interesting. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with the basics. What exactly is an atmospheric river?
Well, it's not just your typical rainstorm.
I figured as much.
Think of it like this. Imagine a river, but instead of water, it's carrying a massive amount of moisture.
Okay, a river in the sky. I'm following.
Exactly. And this river in the sky flows horizontally for thousands of miles, carrying all that moisture from the tropics towards the poles.
Okay, so it's like a pipeline of moisture.
You could say that. And when this pipeline slams into a coastline, especially a mountainous one like we have here in the Bay Area, it gets squeezed out, leading to some serious downpours.
So it's not just how much rain falls, it's how fast it comes down. Makes sense.
Precisely.
So the article mentioned the National Weather Service is already issuing a bunch of alerts.
They're not taking any chances, and for good reason, especially with those king tides thrown into the mix.
Right, the king tides. We got to talk about those. What are they exactly? Super high tides or something?
Basically, yeah. They're the highest tides we see all year, and they happen when the sun, moon, and earth are all aligned in a certain way.
Interesting. So why are they a big deal with this storm coming?
Well, think about it. You've got unusually high tides combined with heavy rain and storm surge.
Not a good combo.
Definitely not. It could make coastal flooding much worse than usual.
Yikes. Okay, so let's break down these alerts one by one. The article mentioned a flood watch for the North Bay interior valleys starting Friday afternoon.
Yeah, those valleys are particularly susceptible to flooding because of all the creeks and rivers.
Right, and the article said excessive runoff could cause flooding in low-lying areas, even urban areas.
Exactly. So if you live anywhere near a creek or in a low-lying area, be prepared.
Not the best weekend for a creekside picnic, then.
Probably not. Then there's a coastal flood advisory for San Francisco and San Pablo Bays, in effect until Monday afternoon.
That's a long time.
Yeah, they're not messing around. And the advisory actually lists specific high tide times and heights, especially for Saturday morning.
So I'm guessing those coincide with the king tides we were just talking about.
You got it. We're looking at a high tide of over 7 feet Saturday morning, and that's before you factor in the storm surge.
So basically, steer clear of the coast this weekend.
Pretty much, unless you want to go for an unexpected swim.
Hard pass on that. Okay, what else is on the weather alert bingo card?
Well, we've got a high wind warning for San Francisco and the Peninsula Coast, starting Friday night.
How high are we talking?
They're predicting gusts up to 50 miles per hour.
Wow, that's enough to knock some trees over.
Absolutely. And it's not just trees. Think down power lines, power outages, the whole 9 yards.
So basically batten down the hatches and charge those phones.
Got it. And don't forget about the wind advisory that covers the entire Bay Area. It goes into effect at different times depending on where you are.
So pretty much everyone in the Bay Area is going to feel the wind this weekend.
In some way or another, yes.
Right. Anything else? Or can we finally relax?
Just one more. A high surf advisory for San Francisco and the Peninsula Coast from Friday night into Saturday.
Of course. So basically, no playing in the waves this weekend.
The National Weather Service is urging extreme caution on the water and at the beaches. So yeah, probably best to stay dry.
Well, that's a whole lot of weather warnings. Flooding, wind, high surf. Sounds like Mother Nature's throwing everything she's got at us.
It definitely seems that way. But hey, at least we know what to expect now, right?
True that. Forewarned is forearmed, as they say.
Exactly. And knowing what's coming is the first step to being prepared and mitigating those potential impacts, which we'll talk about next.
Sounds good to me. Let's dive into that. All right, so we've got the rundown on this wild weather coming our way. An atmospheric river, king tides, and a whole bunch of weather warnings.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
But now let's talk about what we can actually do about it. I mean, we don't want to just sit here and worry.
Right, definitely not. Knowing the risks is important, but taking action is what really matters.
So let's ditch the doom scrolling and get practical. What are some things people can do to get ready right now?
Well, first think about what could potentially be disrupted during a storm like this. Power outages are a big one.
Yeah, with those high winds, it's bound to happen.
So having flashlights, extra batteries, and even some charged up power banks is crucial.
Okay, gotta make sure we can keep those Netflix binges going, even if the lights go out. But seriously, power outages can be more than just an inconvenience, especially for people who rely on medical equipment.
Right. That's a really important point. If you depend on medical devices that need electricity, knowing what to do in a power outage could be literally life-saving.
So what should people do?
Contact your medical provider or power company ahead of time to discuss backup options. Better to be safe than sorry.
Absolutely. Okay, so power is covered. What else should we be thinking about?
Communication.
Oh yeah, cell
Yeah.
service can be spotty during storms.
Exactly. So having a backup plan is crucial. Think about how you'll stay connected with loved ones.
Like a designated meeting place, maybe?
That's a great idea. And maybe even consider some old school methods like walkie-talkies if you have them.
Wow, taking it back to the Stone Age. But seriously, it's good to have options. Okay, so we've covered communication and power. What about practical stuff around the house?
Well, securing loose outdoor objects is always a good first step. Things like patio furniture, garbage cans, anything that could become a projectile in those high winds.
Oh, and plant pots. Don't want those terracotta pots flying around.
Exactly. Bring those items inside or secure them well. And while you're at it, check your gutters and downspouts.
What should we be looking for?
Make sure they're clear of debris so the rainwater can flow freely and prevent any potential backups.
Okay, so secure outdoor stuff, check the gutters. Got it. Anything else?
Having emergency supplies on hand is always a good idea. Things like a first aid kit, non-perishable food, bottled water.
Great, the essentials.
And don't forget about your furry friends. Make sure you have enough food and water for them too.
Oh, right. I need to make sure my cat has enough emergency tuna. Okay, so we've got the emergency supplies covered. What about those of us in flood-prone areas? Anything specific we should be doing?
Well, do you know your evacuation route?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I've heard about evacuation zones, but never actually checked to see if I'm in one. How do you even find that out?
Most city and county websites have interactive maps. You can enter your address and see your risk level.
Wow, that's handy. I'm definitely checking that out later. Okay, so we've covered the basics. Anything else we should keep in mind as the storm approaches?
Well, we've talked about how those king tides are going to make coastal flooding a bigger concern.
Right. They're basically super high tides. Right.
Exactly. So if you live in a low-lying area near the coast, be extra vigilant, monitor the tide charts, and if there are evacuation orders issued, don't hesitate to leave.
Basically, don't try to be a hero. Got it. What about during the storm itself? Any tips for staying safe once the rain and wind really pick up?
Avoid driving if at all possible. But if you absolutely have to be on the roads, remember to slow down, increase your following distance, and never drive through flooded areas.
Turn around, don't drown. Right. Better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly. And if you're at home, it's best to just stay put and avoid any unnecessary trips outside.
Sounds good to me. Snuggle up with a good book, binge watch some shows. Might finally tackle that puzzle that's been sitting on my shelf for months.
Sounds like a plan. Just remember to stay informed about the storm's progress and any official advisories.
Right. Things can change quickly with these storms, so check those weather apps. Keep an eye on social media for updates. Just stay tuned to what's happening.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about the physical preparations, but it's important to acknowledge the mental and emotional side of things, too. Storms like this can be stressful, even for the most prepared person.
Yeah. All that wind and rain can definitely get to you after a while. Any tips for managing the stress?
Having ways to de-stress and relax is key. Whether it's reading, listening to music, or just spending time with loved ones, even if it's virtually. And if you start to feel overwhelmed, don't hesitate to reach out for support. There are resources like crisis hotlines and mental health professionals who can help.
Sometimes just acknowledging those feelings can make a big difference. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from battening down the hatches to taking care of our mental well-being. Any final words of wisdom?
Remember, we're all in this together. Checking in on your neighbors, especially those who are elderly or have disabilities, is a great way to show support. A little kindness goes a long way, especially during tough times.
Well said. So stay safe, stay connected, and let's all look out for one another. Now, I know this storm is top of mind right now, but there's something else I wanted to touch on, something that's been nagging at me a bit.
I'm intrigued. What's on your mind?
You mentioned how climate change is playing a role in these increasingly frequent extreme weather events. And I have to admit, it's a bit unsettling.
I understand what you mean. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate situation, but it's important to think about the bigger picture, too.
It feels like we can't just keep reacting to these storms as they come. We need to be thinking about how to actually mitigate their impact long term.
I agree. It's a crucial conversation to have.
It's a big question, though, isn't it? I mean, what can we actually do about these increasingly intense weather events? Like, we've talked about prepping for this storm, but it feels like we need to be prepping for the future, too, you know?
I completely agree. And while there's no easy answer, I think awareness is a good place to start, like really understanding the science behind climate change and how it connects to these events.
So more than just climate change is real, but actually digging into how it's impacting things.
Exactly. Like, for instance, warmer temperatures mean more evaporation.
Very true.
So that means more moisture in the atmosphere, which leads to these powerful atmospheric rivers we keep seeing. And with rising sea levels, coastal flooding is just going to keep getting worse. It's all connected.
Okay, so knowledge is power. But then what, I mean, are we just supposed to hunker down and wait for the next storm? What can we actually do with this knowledge?
Oh, no, definitely not. We're not powerless, not at all. We have options, both individually and as a community. Like, on a personal level, reducing our carbon footprint is huge.
Right, like driving less, being more energy efficient, you know, making more sustainable choices in general.
Exactly. All those things add up. It might feel small, but think about it. Millions of people making those small changes. That starts to make a real impact.
Yeah, I guess I used to think of those individual actions as just a drop in the bucket, but when you put it that way, it does feel more impactful.
It's the ripple effect. And honestly, don't underestimate the power of collective action either. Supporting businesses that are prioritizing sustainability, advocating for policies that address climate change head on, even just voting for leaders who actually understand the urgency of this issue, all those things make a difference.
So it's about using our voices and our choices to actually push for change. Okay, so it's not just about stocking up on batteries and flashlights. It's also about supporting solutions for the long term.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom either. There's so much innovation happening in the climate space right now, like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture. If we focus our energy and resources in the right direction, there's a lot to be hopeful for.
It's good to hear that because it's easy to just get caught up in the fear and anxiety, but knowing there are solutions out there is huge. We're not powerless.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Every single step we take, big or small, moves us towards a more sustainable future.
That's a great point. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive for today. We covered a lot, from this atmospheric river heading our way to the bigger picture of climate change and what we can do to address it. Honestly, I feel a lot more informed and even a bit more empowered now.
That's fantastic to hear. Knowledge is power, and using that knowledge to make a difference is really what it's all about.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening out there, stay safe during the storm, take care of yourselves and each other, and remember, we have the power to create the future we want.
And as always, stay curious and keep learning.
That's right. Until next time, happy diving, everyone.